Hello again. Basically, this is going to be a pretty simple beginner's tutorial demonstrating how we can get our assets, our pre-made assets, from something like Blender and Substance Painter that you've kind of fully completed into Unreal Engine and set up with very basic materials like the ones we can see in these example pots that I have got in this pack that is available, which is going to be expanded on quite drastically very soon. I'm in the process of doing it, but I thought I could make a video showing how people can do their own, model setup. But yeah, I thought this is a perfect project to do the demonstration in. You can see, these are all our photo scanned pots, so these are obviously, a low poly, mid poly, and the raw photo scanned versions. But the principle is going to be the same with things you've modeled as well. And yeah, I'm going to be doing a few tutorials in this very basic scene. So yeah, let's get cracking with the video. So we have Unreal open, and we have our asset to the side, which in my case is another batch of pots that I need to bring in and set up their materials and stuff for you. So I'm going to be using just this first one as an example, which I'm going to put to the side on my other window, and I'm going to be bringing it into here. So I'm just going to drag that folder, which contains a static mesh and some textures, and I'm not going to go into any deep detail on the import stuff because there are lots of options for various different types of setup on import that we don't really need in this case, but typically default settings are good enough. There is a materials tab and a textures tab which are worth looking at. You obviously want to make sure that this is right for you, but typically I leave it on the basic setup with no materials ticked. That way I can do everything myself and make sure everything's fine. So once we hit import, we are given our file with our folder with our files inside of it, and it should follow the exact same structure as the folder that you've imported. So we get our static mesh, which is here, which we can double click to open, and we can look at it, and we get our stats, which obviously this is our nice sort of pretty high poly one. As these assets I'm adding are going to all be pretty high poly, and allow you to do your own optimization if you choose to buy it. But yeah, that's our static mesh, and we can then go back to our normal panel. Inside this folder we also have, in this case, some textures, and we have our color, our normal, and our mask in this situation, which is basically the ambient occlusion, the roughness, and the metallic all combined into one. If you want a video where I actually explain textures, please let me know and I will add it to the list, and I can do that. So we want to apply a material or our textures to this, so we need to create a material. In this case I am going to go into the folder and just create it with these textures, and I'm going to right click into the empty space and go up to this material option, and then I'm going to name my material, and I'm going to use a typical kind of naming convention, which is M underscore followed by the name of the object that we are going to apply it to. So once we have that, we can double click to open, and that will bring us into our material window, and it should dock it up here for you next to your other windows. We get our material preview, the selected node kind of details will come up here and parameters. You don't need to worry about those for now, and a lot of other options that are a bit beyond basic. Down here we have our stats and find results. So stats will tell you if everything's okay or if there's anything wrong with it in terms of errors, and you can just make that bigger or smaller. And if you lose them, I would look at the Windows options to introduce those. Also, you can see I've got unsaved changes, so at this stage I'm going to just save all with Control-Shift-S, just because I find it's good to save at various milestones so you don't lose anything if a crash happens. So in here we want to bring our content drawer up, which we can do with Control-Space, as well as hitting the little button down there, and we want to bring our textures in by clicking the first and shift clicking the last. Drag that one in, or all of those in, and then we want to reposition these so they're nice and neat. I'm just going to bring my mask down nice and low and my normal map into the middle, so we just have a nice clean setup for our material. Then we want to bring the RGB, which is all channels, or all three channels should I say, which is this top option, and click and drag the pin, and if we were to just drop it into the middle, we would be able to search for a new pin, a new node. If we just drag it into the slot or pin connector on the actual material node, then we're good to go. So because this is a base color texture, we want to go into the base color input of the material node, and it's the same with the others. So normal goes into normal. Now a mask is slightly different, because a mask is essentially a packed or a channel packed image. So rather than the RGB being utilized for the entire file, each channel is an individual file packed into the channel. This can be done because they are grayscale, and again I will probably do a video that covers that specifically after this, to kind of go over the basics. But just to move along, we are using an ORM, which if we was to look at the actual name, we can see occlusion roughness metallic, which is ORM, and then that corresponds to RGB in that order. So O for ambient occlusion, roughness for roughness, and then B would be our metallic, and that is that. So we have our ORM map plugged in. So just as a warning, this isn't quite set up correctly when it comes to masks, but I'm going to move ahead and then come back just so we can see it kind of, you know, once we fix it. So in order to actually apply our material, we come to our static mesh panel, which we opened earlier, and we can see we have loads of options, which I'm just going to collapse, and we have our material slot. In this material slot, currently we have this material in, which we can see on the preview. We then want to open up our content drawer and get our material onto that slot. You can do that by either clicking and dragging, which gives us this blue highlight, and you can drag and let go of that over the blue highlight, or you can select it and hit this little button here, which is the arrow pointing towards it, which is use selected asset from content browser. So as long as you have a valid asset selected and you hit this, it will apply it to the model. And then here we have this reset properties button, which is just this little arrow here, and then you can go back, as well as Control Z, or Z I should say, because I'm English, just to show that we can click and drag. It works exactly the same. So we now have our model with a material, And it looks good, it looks decent, it looks nice. We have our, you know, all the things we should expect. But if you are an artist, for example, that you've come from Substance Painter, you might be looking at this and saying, oh, it doesn't quite look exactly like it does in Substance Painter. And this can be kind of to do with a few things that could be changing it. And that could be something wrong with either or one of the, either of the textures, any of the textures that you've got. Things to check, which are important, is that your color map is actually using 8-bit instead of 16-bit. It tends to, well, it's worth testing, but I'm pretty sure that Substance, in order for it to look correct in Unreal, needs 8-bit. The normal, typically, as long as you have your sampler type set to normal, this will kind of be perfectly fine. And then you can add some nodes in between if you want to change intensity or something like that, which I'm not going to actually do here. I'm just going to leave this very basic. So yeah, 8-bit for the color. The normal, usually this will be automatic, and this is fine, so you don't usually have to worry about this. But the sampler type, make sure that's at normal. Color sampler type will also be color. And then the other things to change is when you are using masks specifically, is that this sampler type is basically set to color now, which is not correct. It's if we actually click into our mask texture, we can see, if we switch off these channels at the top, that this is our channels packed into each individual one, and they are grayscale channels. Grayscale images, sorry, packed into the channels. So having it set to color doesn't really make sense. So there is this option here, this little tick box called sRGB within the texture settings of the texture file. And if we hit this off, you'll see that it becomes slightly paler, which kind of translates to strength in a way. It's taken us straight back to the error once I hit that option. Basically what happened is I clicked this off, it made the changes, and then it said there's an error occurred in the material, and it snapped me to that error to tell me that now this texture isn't set up correctly. But going back to the texture, we can see that it's become paler or lighter, which is obviously affecting the actual values. So it's gone to an actual, it's gone closer to the actual Substance Painter image values, in a sense. You can play around with these compression settings, but I would just leave these as they are. Masks does seem to work, but I just tend to, you can just kind of get away with leaving it like this. We would then save this texture file and return to our material to fix this error. So this is basically to do with the sampler type. If we click onto this and we change this to linear color, we then basically get, and we save it, sorry, we basically then get a closer representation of the Substance Painter material. It might not be perfect, and it might be a case of playing with the normal value in here, and which I'll probably go into in another video, or making sure that your color is in 8-bit. So now that we look at this, this should kind of be a little bit more accurate to what you have made. So that is all done, and that is the basic setup. So if we then grab our object, which you can see I did a bigger one there earlier, we now have that ready and working. So I'm going to just temporarily put it on this table and hit play and go and see our object in the game. or in the scene. And that is it. We have our new object with its material applied. Hope that helped. If anyone wants to help support, you can grab this pack and await the new pot update. There's going to be probably around 20 new ones coming very soon, including the one that you can see and a load of others in this sort of level. And that back wall will be filled eventually, with same as this kind of thing, just piles of different ones for you to use. And I'm going to keep adding to this scene and keep the pack cheap so that everyone kind of, there'll be eventually metal ones added, and I'll kind of redesign the scene so that there'll be all of the photo scan stuff in one corner, then there'll be all of the ancient clay ones, and then there'll be a load of modern metal ones, and so on and so forth, and I'll just keep updating it and adding all the pots you could probably ever need for different scenes. So yeah, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could pick it up and continue to support so I can do more of this stuff. Thank you very much. See you later.